I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Tammy, can you tell us which supervisor here?
Supervisors present, Chairman Nudo, Vice Chair Decker, Supervisor Belsky, Supervisor Geertsen, Supervisor Caro, Supervisor Kabicki, Supervisor Poole, Supervisor Rodriguez, Supervisor Rose, Supervisor Stock, Supervisor Thomas, and Supervisor Uhas. Have I missed anyone?
Okay, thank you. Also, Sheriff Zorner is here, and is Chief Deputy Miller and Captain Gonzalez. Welcome. Then on behalf of Brookside and their director, Linda Bagdala, where is she? Linda, thank you to you and your staff for preparing all the good food. And also I want to welcome, or actually is welcoming us here, the chairman of Brookside Trustees, Bob Pitts. Thank you, Bob. Okay, with that being said, I guess we can start our meeting, and I'll pass it over to County Executive Samantha Kerkman.
Well, thank you, Gabe, for that. Thank you, Chairman, for that welcome. I appreciate everybody being here tonight. This is the next step in the budget process, and I appreciate everybody's input during the budget vision meeting that we had in April. So this is a continuation of that meeting in the budget process. I as well want to thank Linda and her team, and also wanted to point out that 2 weeks ago we received our audit through here, and we had a good record or perfect record from the state of Wisconsin. So again, congratulations to you and your team. I know you work really hard to strive to that level, and continuing on the good works of everybody here. I also want to thank my team. I have Tammy and Jill and Joe, he's in the back, for helping put everything together and all the logistics here. I also want to thank Barna and Patty and Chris and Matt for their work and their work in the upcoming months in this process. So again, this is the second step, but you know, it's a process. I also want to have everybody go around the room. I'm going to have we have some new people that are here, and I want to have everybody else just introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Matt Serino and have everybody introduce themselves just a little bit.
So Matt Serino, facility
I'm so happy that God is here, and I hope you enjoy the food. And come back again and visit. We appreciate it.
John Jansen, Director of Department of Human Services.
Chief Deputy.
Donald's Captain of Administrative Services.
All right.
Finance Director of Health Services.
All right. Well, I believe that's everybody that's in attendance. So again, thank everybody for taking time out of their busy schedules, especially leading up to a holiday weekend. This is really important as we go forth in the budget process. As you can see at your spot, there's an agenda, kind of outlines where we're going to go tonight. There's also the CIP 5-year plan, and then there's some renderings of the Human Services building that are at your spots. And if you don't have any of those documents, please let us know, and we'll make sure that you have them. So tonight we're going to go through the CIP. This is a draft. This is the first step in the process. Many of these projects on this CIP you've already seen and become aware of. If they're blue, those are some things that have been newly added to the CIP, and that's what we're going to be talking about is that. And then going forward, we're going to have a discussion about the debt reduction plan and CIP best practices. So I really do appreciate everybody's input as we go through this process, and look forward to your input as we craft and go forward. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Budget Director Patty Merrill for some remarks.
Thank you, County Executive Kerkman. Excuse me. Before we get started on the main part of tonight's meeting, which is a review of the draft of the CIP, we wanted to take a minute to walk you through the process that capital requests go through to get to this point. The budget process is kicked off in late May or early June by the budget team. Budgets are rolled out to divisions, and the budgets are due back by the end of July. There are basically three components of a budget submission: the operating budget, which is the requests of the division on their operations; personnel requests. So personnel requests for new positions are not included in those operational budgets, but they're submitted through a different process, which workflows to human resources, who compiles them. After human services has compiled them, finance costs them, and then they're reviewed in a series of meetings with the county executive. And the third component are capital requests. Similar to the personnel requests, divisions submit their request for capital items. They're compiled by the CFO of Public Works, currently Chris Walton, formerly Jim Kupfer. As part of the submission process, the divisions work with the purchasing division to determine costs on items being requested. In some cases, an RFP might have been completed that leads to the cost of an item or a project. Once the budget deadline arrives, capital requests are reviewed and a list similar to what you have in front of you is compiled. The list is reviewed with the county executive and the budget team, and it is trimmed down. There's outreach to the divisions to ask questions. More detail is provided if needed. Timing is reviewed. Overall costs and priorities are reviewed. The list is reviewed 3 to 4 times before the CIP is finalized and added to the budget book. As the county executive said, the list you have in front of you is a draft. It is a work in process. It is not the final draft. There's still work to be done. Before I hand this off to Chris to walk through this draft CIP with you, I too would like to thank the county executive and the board chair for having this meeting, and the members of the budget team, Barna, Matt, Chris, and Nick, not only for the work that they've been putting in on these CIP requests, but also for the work in preparing for this meeting tonight. And with that said, Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to give a little bit of an overview of page 1 that you're looking at. This is a high level broken out by each division and department that shows you what the net bonding, or what the total project expense would be, with below showing the bonding, the revenue that makes up what you're seeing. The total bonding that we're currently showing in 2024 is at $22.3 million. What you're seeing is not necessarily the final copy. This is a draft. This is our second look at it. We take all the divisions' requests, such as Patty said. It's a much higher number than what you're looking at here. We have internal discussions that may push some of those projects out already. And then going forward, now we're sitting at 22, which is closer to our wants. And then we're truing up numbers. We're seeing what projects are the most needed, and then go from there. So we can flip the page to 24, or to page 2. This is more just of a specific breakdown of 2024 that you're looking at. Both of these pages are in the budget book, so a lot of you guys are probably already familiar with these 2 summary pages. I'm going to flip right over to page 3. We can start getting right into the heart and detail of all the projects. As County Executive Kerkman mentioned, we did highlight some of these projects in blue. What these are projects that have never shown up on the CIP, but are now in 2024. A lot of them have good reason, such as the first one on here under the Sheriff's Division of drones. There was a regulation change on the requirements that are needed. The old drones are no longer up to regulation. They need new drones. That's why it wasn't on there last year, but it's a request and a need of this year. Going through here, a lot of these items you've seen over and over: body cameras, fleet vehicles. Those are more like an every year request. There's a boat marine unit patrol. I can let the sheriff speak more to that, but I know that the boat is over 20 years old and just in need of replacing. Sheriff, if you want to speak to anything further, or if anybody has questions for the sheriff, now's your time.
Does anyone have a direct question? Yes, ma'am.
Sheriff Warner, what are you going to do with the old boat? Is it possible to donate it to like Kenosha Sailing Center?
I don't know if they would have a use for it. We've actually donated to other entities locally, something we've actually been doing recently. We just donated a squad car that was of no use to us anymore. It would have brought us almost nothing. And there's several departments in our surrounding area that have no money, those squads, and are actually sharing vehicles with like inspectors and things of that nature. So we did just do that. As in reference to this boat, yeah, I would not be opposed to something like that. I don't know. I'm familiar with them. I don't know if they have a use for it.
They may, because I know they're looking for an additional safety boat just
That would
to
work, probably.
be able to be out while the kids are sailing. So that might be a viable option.
Yeah. The boat we're talking about is the Lund. It's like a really big fishing boat.
Oh.
It's our old boat. We just had quite a sizable repair to it. So as he discussed, it is very old. But we keep plugging away with it. So we
Well,
just
keep
repaired
them in
it.
mind, please. I think it would
Absolutely. Absolutely.
be. Okay, thanks.
There's no other direct questions of me? Go ahead, sir.
I've got one. So I know in being out in the western end of the county with the lakes, we have water patrols out there, and we periodically from time to time have to replace our water patrol boats as well. And we have usually I think it's a 50-50 matching grant from the DNR for that. I don't know if you've looked into that or not, or if that's even possible or applies, but just thought I'd mention it.
It would apply.
Okay.
Yeah, they reimburse the course over 5 years. Yes, sir.
How many drones do we have in our inventory now? And are we able
Right
to sell
now-
the current one?
Right now, we have 12 drones. I want to speak to the drone topic about the FAA changes. Right now, we have 12 aerial drones. We have the first one we received. It's a very large one, like 8 propellers. It's huge. It's the big one. It's called the Matrice 30. We have Mavic 2 Enterprises, DJI Mavic 3s, which are relatively new. They're fantastic. What the gentleman was talking about, the FFA had changed some regulations. What that means on September 16th, what's going live is called remote ID, and that's an electronic way for every drone will have to emit a signal if it's anything over 249 grams, which is anything bigger than the very smallest drones. So it's going to have a device on it, or that unit itself will have to be capable of doing that. And remote ID is a way for the FAA or others to identify a drone being operated. So they'll be able to see where it is and things of that nature. So as of September 16th, this goes live. So we have several items ordered. You can install them. They're a few $100. We're doing that right now. They should be in shortly. But some of these funds are for the new drones. We're looking to get more drones with thermal imaging on them. Some of you are aware there was a high-speed chase, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, about a week and a half ago. Came to the city of Kenosha in the Pleasant Prairie, and it came by me, so I jumped into it. And when I got on scene, when the vehicle crashed, the drone and canines is how we brought those people into custody. So I was one of the founding members of the drone unit. Maybe you can tell I like it. So I was an observer for them, and that thermal imaging on their drone was picking up signatures from it could tell 5 to 10 degree differences on the ground. It was one of those 90+ degree days. We were able to talk the canines right toward the person and push them out and took them into custody within 30 yards of where he came out of the wood line. So that's it's incredible technology for obviously the suspects, but lost children, silver alerts. We use them all the time. There have been 26 deployments of the drones so far this year in 23. We also use them for what's called MCAT, Major Crash Assistance Team. If you haven't heard about it, it's how we do these major crash investigations. MCAT was out on the very unfortunate fatal with the two young people recently. And they can, I don't have all the terminology to tell you here, but it's incredible. The way we use to triangulate crashes is so much more effective for scenes as well, crime scenes as well. So the drones get utilized. It does look like a sizable expense, but we're able to, I think we're going to try to replace some of the drones we have, which will go back out for auction and whatnot. But 5 more thermal image drones. So they're always on the road and we use them all the time. So if you have any other questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
All right, seeing no further questions, we'll move over to the joint services, which I will not lie, I'm probably the least knowledgeable on these two subjects. I know that they've been going through our ERP software updates as well as computer updates. I know Barna is usually the one that's a point of contact for finance with these items, so if there's any questions, I'll let Barna speak further into detail, or I guess you can address Barna with any questions you may have.
Yeah, I just have one question. So is this, I know this is a shared expense and it's percentage wise, I think on some things is more heavy on the city than the county. What percentage of that we're bonding for joint services, what percentage is that of the total?
So these two capital projects specifically, so normally when we include capital items in our facilities budget, that would go through the formula and it works out to be, and it's based on assessed value. It ends up being, every year it changes, but this year it's like 58% county, 42% city. Now these two projects specifically, the computer equipment software that has to do with upgrading some 911 systems, we're applying for a grant from the state. So this is a worst case scenario that if we don't receive the grant, that this would be the full amount. The network switches was something that was hashed out when we were in the joint services budget meeting. This is something that is needed by joint services, and the county, in the spirit of getting through that budget process, agreed to put that on our CIP in order to obtain some other evidence technician position that was agreed upon as part of that process.
I don't know if Supervisor Uhas wants to talk at all as well, but this is with regard to primarily with regard to the 911 upgrade and joint services. We did have a letter of support from our legislative delegation to try to achieve a grant. So hopefully going forward, we won't need to have this in there, but again, this is in case we do, so.
Okay, I do also want to point out that on these pages, you'll see below each division or department, you'll see the 2023 bonding. That's just for comparison for your guys' purposes. Take into account that 2023, the bonding total was $19.5 million, and we're showing you $22.3 million. Odds are $22.3 million is not going to be the bonding limit amount. So just as you take a peek at these, remember to keep that in mind. We'll flip over to page 4. Which is starting with the facilities PSB building. I'm not going to go line by line and describe every single project. I think if we do that, we'll probably be here till midnight. So I'm going to just pick ones at random, honestly. I'm not trying to exclude any projects or highlight any projects for that matter. So if you guys, as you're looking at it and you have questions on one that I didn't say, feel free to ask. Some of the highlights for this one would be these dorm enhancements. These are at the jail of the PSB. They are directly above some of like the detective offices and desks. Oftentimes there's problems with plumbing in regards to inmates overflowing toilets, sinks, and all of that nature. This is to start addressing this. As part of the 2023 funds, we are doing kind of like a sample run on this before we obviously look to expend $1.2 million on this. We have picked a smaller dorm that we're trying what we want to do for all dorms to make sure that it works. Some of the other things, building improvements, this is just the things that are encompassed within Public Works. It could refer to flooring, it could refer to washrooms, and things of that nature. The underground storage tanks, that's one of the higher numbers on there. That was on there last year, hence why it's not in blue. But this is a requirement that we're getting from our insurance company. If these aren't updated, just purely due to age and the possibility of them leaking or anything along those matters, we could lose coverage. So it's something that we need to do to have them replaced. This is simply a placeholder, the number. I know bids were going out with design and along those matters. We've taken this number based off of similar prices for the highway department when they redid the fuel station there, and that's the number you see. I'll stop there, and if there's any questions in regards to the PSB facilities, we can try and address those. Yeah, Supervisor Decker?
When was the last time that we have done any enhancements on the PSB for the dorms or anything like that? Does anyone know?
Matt, do you know?
I didn't hear the last part of your question.
When was the last time we've done any enhancements on the dorm or repairs or anything like this that we needed bonding for?
For bonding, I don't know if we've done through bonding. I know we've done some repair work in L dorm and.
I mean, like major. Nothing, not just
exterior renovation project a few years back between pretrial and Public Works was a bonded project. So
okay.
Within the last 5 years, we have.
Okay, how about the interior where we're talking about the jail area?
I don't believe so. No.
Okay. The sheriff, do you have an answer?
I think the answer to that is when we renovated KCDC, when we added the D dorms, so those dorms that stack on top of each other, but that was probably prior to 2010, maybe?
Okay.
That was probably the last time.
Thank you.
Can I have the floor? Can we? Can you refresh our memory on this $1,670,000? That's, we split that with the city through the formula, right?
We are allowed to submit 200,000. Actually, it started out at 200,000 and then it's been indexed. It's as part of the IGA, so we don't share this in total amount with.
Is it the
city?
200 or below or 200 and above?
It's actually in total.
Oh, the total that we, so this
Correct.
1 million, and then we also don't charge back the debt service.
Correct.
Okay, so the only thing we charge through the formula is $200,000. It's capped at 200,000, and we review that with the city, right? And we have to get their approval for that.
Correct. That's included as part of the facilities budget.
Yeah. But so when we do this, we'll do the full bonding, but then it flows through the formula as far as a levy reduction in the future. All right, good, thanks.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, we'll move on to the Facilities Division of Human Services building, which is pretty much all. The Human Services relocation project, which you see the renderings behind you. A lot of the supervisors have some of those pictures on your desk. Nick has one put up here on the screen. That's what the outside of the building will look like. What makes up this 2.7 that you're looking at involves money for furniture, architect fees, and any IT that we will have. These will be front-end numbers that we need to use and purchase prior to purchasing the building 5 years down the line. I'll surely let Patty or Barna speak further into detail on any of that, and then any questions you guys may have. There's a number of people who can help answer those.
As Chris said, the costs that are reflected in the CIP are costs that we need to incur before we move in, before we start renting. So these aren't costs of the purchase price that will happen in 2029 or 2030. This is furniture and IT and things like that that need to be handled before we move in, before we begin to lease.
Patty, what is the carryover from 2023, the HS fund, Human Services Fund? What is that?
We have been building a balance in that Human Services Building Fund for a couple of years in anticipation of either the repairs we would need to do on the building, or in this case, when the board decided to move, they could be used towards that. So at this point, that fund is at $2.3 million. So we're using those funds to fund these things at this time. So there's zero bonding involved. Those funds are being used towards furniture and the increased architect fees. The $918,000 is coming from ARPA funds.
And is any of that coming off of the purchase price?
No.
Okay, so any money we have left would be rolled over into general fund?
No, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. Yes, if there is a remaining balance, and we have been building about $500,000 a year into that fund. Mm-hmm. So as that builds, there will be some offset at the time of purchase that will be remaining in that fund.
Okay, thank you.
In 2029, what do we expect how much we will have to bond for the purchase price?
I believe that it is about 19.8
$19.8 million?
Yeah.
And that board, we have not approved that yet. That we would have to prospectively approve that.
The initial resolution?
Right.
Yes, and since our CIP is for 5 years, it does not show on the CIP. And since the life of an initial resolution is 5 years, it has not come through in that form either. We are looking at the possibility of bringing forward an initial resolution possibly early next year, because the timing would then work within, not necessarily the 5 years, but we would have to borrow within the 5 years, but we would have 2 years to expend the funds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll keep moving. I do want to point out, Patty did bring up a good point that the purchase of that building is not showing because it's out in 29 and 30. For those of you who may remember, in prior CIPs, we did used to have a future projects column off to the right of the total columns. We're bringing back a hybrid formula of that. At the bottom of each line, if there are projects that we specifically know about that are of higher value or higher importance, there will be a future projects line, and then there will be detail further in the packet at the end of it that will list off some of those projects. So some of these things don't come as some surprise as the years push forward.
But one more question on the financing of that. So are these prices projected to that date? And how do you know those are secure prices? I mean, if you project, the building is, this is 38 million, 39 million. How do we know that's going to be good in that year?
The work on the building has begun.
Yes.
The first bid packets have gone out and come back. So the initial exterior work, those costs have been secured, and we know those are for sure. The second bid packet, and I'm going to defer to Jim Cupper, those have gone out, but they are not back yet. So there may be some tweaking that will be the interior work. But the purchase agreement that the board entered on this said that we would pay $2.6 million for the building plus the improvements. And the improvements will be done now. They will not be done 5 years from now. And there will be no inflation on that because they will have already been incurred, and that will be our purchase price, offset by any credits or revenue sources that we may have.
No, we haven't read we, being the board members, have not read the contracts. Are there any clauses therein that allow for increases based upon some sort of exception?
No.
So those are frozen?
Yeah, the board did approve the contract back in 2022.
No, I know that.
Okay.
So.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we'll drop to the bottom of page 4, which is the capital projects. This is the energy efficiency projects and the HVAC replacement projects. These are pools of funds that are used for some of the projects the electrician does that replaces LED lightings throughout the buildings. And the HVAC replacement, you can never predict exactly which big units are going to go and when, so these funds are used to replace those as needed. If there's no question on that, we will flip over to page...
I've got a question on that.
Oh.
Can you elaborate on, I mean, we spend $100,000 a year on energy efficient projects.
It's not always $100,000 a year.
Well, we bond for it.
We do bond for it. It'll carry over. Right now, this is the number that we're just putting in there. It could be lowered. The fund balance is sitting at a somewhat higher balance. We could afford to go 1 year without it if need be.
What is it at now?
Roughly 200,000 with, I think, another 40 or so that is already planned to come out of LED lightings for the next project. I don't know exactly what the next project is, but...
So 200,000 with 40 earmarked to be spent, or 40 get
Right.
returned? Okay.
Correct.
What do we spend on average? I mean, do we have a yearly average of what we spend of that 100,000?
Yeah. Well, it's not an average. Typically, we're seeing roughly in the between 50 and 70,000. There have been years where it's gone slightly over 100, but you will see, well, you don't see, I have here several at the 50, 60, 70, and then 2 in the 100,000 range dating back to 2015.
So is it all lighting? I mean, what kind of projects?
Matt, you can speak more to that.
Yep. The majority of the projects are all LED conversion lighting. Like, for example, this room was done by Mike. A project like this, material alone is around $5,000 to $7,000 just for this one room of lighting. So these smaller projects that he does throughout the county can add up quickly. And we take those invoices and receipts and take those and put them in towards focus on energy credits, try to get dollars back from those programs and incentives to move forward. We use them on fan replacements. We can get per CFM of air.
Can you pull the mic closer to you?
Oh, yep, sorry. We'll use them on smaller HVAC equipment replacements. You can get some incentives through that. We use it. We've used it on some boiler replacements as well. So we use it on all aspects of our facilities to try to improve them. And it's a great fund for us. Like Chris said, we use around 60 to 70,000 a year, and it's a great need. We do use it.
Thank you. That's all I have.
I'd also like to comment regarding the cost savings. We have seen a lot of cost savings related to that. There are some facilities that we're paying the same utility costs that we were 10, 12 years ago.
The price being on Public Works, the price may be a little higher too because everything is coming in so over budget. So that's why we're looking at 100,000. And if we don't spend it, that's great. So.
Yeah, just a question. Since it sounded like we started this in 2016, was it $100,000 in 2016 as well going back? Does anybody recall? Or was it some other smaller or bigger number?
I don't know if we specifically started it in 2015, 2016. I don't know when the fund started. I just pulled expenses back from that date.
Well, the reason I'm asking is twofold. Is one is that how many buildings are left that they foresee wanting to replace that, and then $100,000 in 2016, and $100,000 now is probably about 40% less for that type of lighting installation and all that. I'm just curious if we're going at the same pace of replacing existing lights as we were several years ago before inflation really took hold.
We try to buy in bulk as we can. We get the lighting and skids, and then we'll, currently we're working through some of the resident rooms in Brookside is a large project that Mike's working on. We're doing the interior lighting at KCDC, and then we'll be shifting to the public safety building, which is probably 75% still T8 non-LED fixtures. So there's a significant savings that we'll have in that building as well.
Yeah, I think some people, I know I'm having a hard time hearing you. I don't know if it's the mic, but I've been in too many industrial plants in my life. My hearing is just bad in general anyway, but.
I don't know what you heard, but.
Yeah, no, I heard safety building going through there. I didn't know if you had said something in regards to, like, we have another 1,000 lights that we have to replace in XYZ buildings or anything.
I don't have that number with me, but we do have a sheet that we keep track of, so we'd be welcome to share that with you.
Yeah, I'm just curious if it's still going to go the next 5 years, I guess. That's, it's projected out for 5 years. Do we still foresee that we'll be replacing them? Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Is this money only going towards replacement or upgrades, or could this be used also for like the new human services building?
It's typically used for replacing and upgrading. I don't know specifically where you'd want to put it in regards to the new human services building.
Yeah, the new human services building.
It's just like
could that be used to fund the LED lights in that building, or is this just strictly for upgrades and replacement?
This is strictly for upgrades.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're completely gutting the new building. There'll be nothing existing there.
There we go. What is the return that we get with the focus on energy credits, typically?
It's usually per fixture.
Okay.
So you can get 30 cents per fixture. You can get a percentage on your total invoice. There's a few different formulas I use, but it's a great program. I'd be happy to show you the progress we've had with it.
Okay, that would be great, because I know when I looked into it for my business, the return was not even worth the paperwork. And then you said we're doing LED or high efficiency lighting in Brookside. So when this was built, we did not put in energy efficient lighting?
This original building from 1995.
When we did the whole thing.
Rehab, CBRF is all LED already.
Okay.
That was done, yep. But this building is still has
okay,
areas.
So it's just Brookside. The other half is already done.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Do we have a general idea? You said like next, your phase is going to focus on the PSB. Which buildings are primarily done? Which buildings are outstanding? I think that's what Supervisor Thomas was looking for, and that's what I'm curious about that myself. Not to the T fixtures, but which buildings are we done with? What's on our list still?
Sure, I could provide a list of that for you, or I can give it to you now.
Yeah, I'm curious now.
Yeah, so with Brookside, some of the resident rooms never got touched during the remodel, and some of the basement never got touched. So we have to go through Brookside that way. Safety building is, like I said, 75% not LED. KCDC still has some areas. And then we help out at Parks Department as well if it's needed. So there's quite a few areas that we do.
Okay. Well, I just, yeah, if you could send your list, that would be helpful. It doesn't, not right now, obviously, but I just see 3 buildings and then the Parks Department, but another 5 years worth of projects.
So public safety building has a lot of lights.
Right. No, that it does, and I'm sure KCDC does as well. So, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Chris, I have a question. Back in 2018, we deferred HVAC replacements being implemented. Has that been done since 2018, or have we just been pushing it out?
Are you referring to we just did bond for the $100,000 in that year? We usually do it on a after we look at what our fund is, what we know that we're going to look at in regards to replacing, we'll decide if we can go a year or if we really should bond to have some type of pool in there in case something fails. I can't tell you offhand specifically which years we may or may not have skipped. I will say that the HVAC fund is sitting at around like 60,000, and obviously those being much pricier items, the 100 grand for that I wouldn't recommend pushing off because we do need that as a pool. But again, the energy efficiency is kind of the other way. So when we have our further discussions after this meeting, when we're trying to make budget cuts, those are things that can be looked at.
So has the HVAC been replaced or upgraded out at KCDC since 2018?
I assume you're referring to the big roof project. That's in a different budget. We don't take those specific ones from here unless you're referring to ones that we haven't got to yet that may have needed to been replaced before the 4 phases have gone into effect. Is that what you're looking for?
I'm just asking if anything's been replaced out at KCDC regarding HVAC.
Yeah, Matt, can you speak to any of that besides?
Yes, so we're on the second phase of work right now. First phase replaced, I would say, the east side of the building, all the major rooftops and all the kitchen equipment. And now we're working on admin roll call in the front, and we'll do D-dorm and medical in the back. So there's been quite a bit of work done so far.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on the facilities capital projects? Being none, we will flip the page over to page 5, which is facilities. I'll point out the one at top, the emergency siren at the 60th Street Tower. This was presented by Supervisor Stock. Some of his constituents in the area had concerns over safety in regards to this emergency sirens being removed from the firehouse that was there. We've talked to Sergeant Hannah, who has had conversations about these with some of the professionals, and 30,000, that size of siren is what they're looking at. So we have put that into this capital budget. Some of the other items that you'll see, one of the more higher items is the HVAC replacement at KCDC. This is the 4th and 5th phase. As a lot of you may already know, the 3rd phase had gone over budget. We needed to split it in order to award the contract and keep the project going without going to a halt. These are the remaining funds that we're projecting at the moment in order to finish that project. Right above it, it may look a little goofy, seeing the parking lot replacements at KCDC, and then right below it saying highway funded. Our highway department, one of the engineers, did a really great job of analyzing all of the roads, parking lots within the parks, golf, and facilities departments, seeing what they're capable of doing in order for us to not go out to a third party, but rather have our own in-house highway department do this. So the 350,000 that you're seeing as a negative here and offsetting is actually put into the highway infrastructure paving number that we'll get to in a little bit here. Some other things here, the radio system redundancy at 220,000. That it was kind of exposed between some of the power loss and storms that we've experienced. All the brains are out at the KCC tower, and if you lose power or connectivity to that, it kind of shuts down all emergency communication. So this is being proposed. It's a new item to have it replaced. It's an emergency item that needs to be on here.
Chris, I just want to elaborate a little bit on this particular item because this happened during Country Thunder on that Saturday evening where we had the Country Thunder, we had a storm coming through, the tower out there was struck, and it brought to light that if we don't have a backup tower, so our first responders, essentially the fire department, was not able to communicate with one another. Everybody has a cell phone, so they were able to continue on. We also had a missing child that night as well, so it was just one of those more challenging nights, and So Shelley went out with Frank and they went out and looked at how we could build our redundancy. So if one of our towers goes down, we have a backup. So this would put a tower at the 60th Street here. And I want to, Shelley's not able to be here tonight, but I want to thank her and Frank for really putting a lot of thought into this and how we can build a system that will last if something challenging happens in the future. In addition to that, also when that was done, we also noticed that our tower out at the KCC was not, there were some challenges. If it was an ice storm like we had last fall, and we had one last winter, that we might have some challenges. So we spent $30,000 out of reserve fund to actually secure and make the tower be able to withstand an ice storm. Now, again, it wouldn't withstand maybe a tornado, so that's why the redundancy system is important in having the 60th Street tower as well. But those two things go hand in hand, and I, again, just want to thank Shelley and Frank for their work on this.
Okay, thank you. I'll just also notate some of the roof replacements that you see on here. There's some at the cold storage and radio tower of KCC, as well as KCDC after the new HVAC units are put on there. You're seeing a smaller amount in 2024 with the heavier amount in 2025. This is solely to get the design and engineering done on these items. That never changes. Once we get that done, it allows us to go out and bid at a much more efficient time and save a lot of costs that we've seen over the years when Frank has been bidding a lot of the similar projects. So I'll stop there, and if anybody has any questions about anything they see on the page, we'll do our best.
Just on the emergency siren, that the cost is, we were just repurposing the one that was taken down, correct? We're just putting the old one back up?
No, this is for, I think, in talking with them, it seems like they have a lot more regulations, better quality systems that are, I think they've been replacing throughout the system, the years. I know they're looking at replacing in bulk going forward, although the cost is quite expensive. So all these systems are much more efficient, but this would be brand new.
Okay, because when I had talked to Sergeant Hand before, it was, if you change one, you have to change them all as far as emergency sirens, and he was discussing just repurposing the old analog one, because otherwise you have to switch over to digital. So I was just curious if this is how that was set up.
Okay, yeah, I can have further discussion with them. That wasn't my take from it, but I can certainly bring it up to get clarity.
That's fine. And then what was the timeline of, if this, assuming this is approved, how soon would that be? Would that go live?
I can get clarity on that too.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the facilities department? If not, we can flip the page over to page 6. Top of the page is planning and development. The only project that they have is that South Pike River restoration. The Army Corps has been having several issues with staffing, which has delayed some of the results and reporting that we've been wanting from them. We were supposed to get something in August of this year, so we could better analyze the numbers that we have. That has now been pushed back to September. Because of that, and because of us still needing to go out and negotiate or purchase land, if we get to that point, we're probably looking into 25 before we see construction on this project, and that's why it's shown as such. Between now and then, if we get updated numbers and we realize we may need to push it forward, you could see that move either way, but that's just the update of where we stand with that. If there's any questions, we'll keep moving right on to the 12.
Chris, on the Pike, the thing we're waiting for is, one of the things we're waiting for is whether it can be redesigned with flood mitigation. The project as designed, had no flood mitigation. So that's what you're talking about, right? And we were expecting to get something in August, but we have not got that yet. So,
Correct.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, we will go on to golf. As you've seen in the last 2 years, I believe, we have the proposed future year of 2024 all funded out of reserves. Golf, since COVID has hit, has been doing extremely well in building up a reserve fund, being closer and closer to quote unquote self-sustaining. The biggest project that you see in here is the golf and course improvements, which was discussed and voted on last year. It involves irrigation at the red, redesign of the practice and driving range of the red, redesign of the bunkers on the blue, and you'll see increased costs out into 25 and 26 that you haven't seen prior. This was quoted at a $4 million project. Obviously inflation and things of that have played in nature, but they're also looking at redesigning the drainage throughout the golf course as well, being that they're doing all these upgrades. At the same time, it's the perfect time to address any drainage problems that they have. So that's where you see these numbers a little bit higher than what you may have seen in last year's or this year's budget book.
Just to add, we discussed Monday night in our Public Works meeting that there is a drainage issue that was not addressed originally when it was architected, and so our new appointee has looked at it, and they're going to be making some adjustments so that we don't have the problems in the future. So that's why that's in there.
Correct.
Is that the only improvement at golf? You
Only
said all of these improvements at golf. Is the drainage the only one?
No, it also includes the bunker restorations, improving the driving range and the tee boxes. There's inside these budgets as well is storage maintenance buildings for both Pets and Brightondale. We're looking at the one at Pets to be shared with Parks at the moment to be more cost efficient rather than having two maintenance buildings relatively close to each other combining. So all those are included in that.
And that will all be paid for by golf revenue?
That's the hope, yes.
The hope.
It will be, yes. We have currently just under $2 million in that reserve fund, and then we have the 10 or 20 year repayment plan of this large project.
So it will be paid for by golf, not the taxpayer?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that last year when we went through the site, Jim and previous golf director, they had proposed, I think, the first price increases or rate increases, and you can correct me, 8 or 10 years or something like that. And through their manipulations of the numbers, that's what allowed, best of my knowledge, and plus increased rounds, that they're more self-sufficient in handling all this. So at least my question, is there going to be, doesn't necessarily pertain to this, but is there going to be a 2 or 3 year revisit of golf rates again as everything else keeps increasing, that instead of waiting as long as we did last time, we'll do that more regularly to make sure we stay ahead of the curve, I guess, on expenses?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something we need to continue to watch the market around us, and we need to revisit at least every couple of years just to make sure we want to maintain affordable golf for the people of our county and tourism, but we also want to make sure our prices are fair and covering our expenses. So it's something we always need to be looking at for sure.
Thank you. And I think there's been a weather related, probably we've had a lot of increase in the number of rounds as well. So the golf price increase hasn't affected the playing or anything like that. Would that be correct as well?
Correct. Yeah, we're actually slightly above the round count from last season. So
okay, great. Thank you.
If there's no other questions pertaining to golf, we can flip the page onto page 7. This is Parks and Recreation. I will point out the largest project on here would be the Pike River Phase 3 project. If anybody's been out to Pets recently, Phase 1 and Phase 2 have been done. This would be the final phase, I guess closer on the beer garden side of the river for those who are out there. The personal goal for Matt in the Parks Division is to get 1 million in grants. He has a little over 300 as a tentative award. They're continuing to work on that between him and Wyatt. You'll also see, this is the only page where it'll be highlighted in blue, but not have an amount in 2024. We wanted to significantly point out parkland development uses to kind of give you guys a better idea of where those funds are planned to be used at. Obviously this is tentative, but just to show that the money isn't sitting there, but rather being used towards some of these projects in which we'd like to tackle. With that said, I'll kind of open up the floor.
You know what my topic's going to be? The Kemper Shoreline revetment restoration. So I see that we have money, and I know County Executive Kerkman is working very hard with state and federal to try to get money. I hope that the push for this coming year is to really make this happen in 2025, so we're not pushing it out further, because the rest of the shoreline revetment will have been done by the city, which leaves Kemper extremely vulnerable. Also, I had requested, and I don't know if it's going on bonding or somewhere else, but there is a real need for upgraded lighting at Kemper Park and some pathway restoration. So I would like to see that in this project plan because it is really needed. It hasn't been upgraded. We've got falling apart lighting poles made out of cement, deteriorating, and it's really unsafe. Thank you.
What is the 50,000 going to be spent on? Is that for planning or?
Correct. That would be the planning and design for that.
And I don't know if this question goes or is best answered by you or anybody else in the room, but I know that in the last administration, the talks with the city of doing the projects coincided. We're not going anywhere. Have we re-engaged those conversations, or has that ship sailed? The city's going to do their project. We're going to do our own.
The city is going ahead with their project, as Supervisor Belsky had said, this year. So we are still looking for dollars, and again, right now we're working on the business plan. So that is underway right now, and they're working on, they were here a few months ago to do some interviews, do surveying. They're, working diligently on putting that plan together for us on the Kemper Center and where we go in the future. So those are the things that I'm kind of waiting for. Now the shoreline is a whole separate issue. Again,
right.
That is one where we have to do our due diligence. I know U.S. Senator Baldwin will be in town tomorrow. So hopefully I can ask her as well. Just like many of the communities along the Great Lakes side, we're all looking for resources from the federal government to help us with the challenging shoreline conditions.
Right. And how much of that 2.9? I know a very large portion of that 2.9 is just staging. Getting the equipment out there.
We don't, and again, Matt isn't here with the plan. So one of the things that the mayor has shared with me with regards to the city's plan is that they are actually keeping a lot of the existing shoreline there, and instead of what was originally proposed was to take it out and fill it with new. Now they're looking at just capping what's there and making it stronger going forward. That's what brought down the price on the city's project, because I know their price dropped significantly. I think it went from like $10 or $11 million down to $5 million. Don't quote me specifically, right. But I mean it almost cut the cost of the project in half. So those are the things that we're looking at as well with with how our project was originally designed. Our project was originally designed to take out what was there and then bring in new.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, two questions. One is on the shoreline restoration as well. Over the years, that number has fluctuated as high as like 20-some million dollars. And then here, here we're just seeing another fluctuation of that. And I don't know what previous studies were done or who came out to look at that, but
so at the time when this dollar amount was put in, the county was asking, again, this was under the previous administration, was asking for $20 million of help from the federal government. So that's why the number is where it's at. Again, it's not the whole cost of the whole project, because again, the cost of the project, you're right, is originally as designed was about $27 million. So again, these are placeholders to try to go out and capture dollars as we go forward. So again, it's so that we don't lose track that we need to have a complete comprehensive look at what we have for Kemper Center. Not only Kemper Center itself, like as Supervisor Belsky had said, but the shoreline.
Right. So is there, of that 1,700 feet of shoreline, are we focusing on the most dire aspects of it that have encroached the most of this first amount, or is that we're going to wait until we get this study done this coming year for that 50,000?
Yeah, that is just a portion of what the cost of the project.
Oh no, I understand that. I mean, are we going to? Is the idea is to do this sort of in phases? I mean, looking at a couple of years here,
right?
Are we going to just go from one end to the other, or target the most vulnerable areas first, or is that not yet?
When those numbers were put in, I believe that was when we had that grant out to try to get the $20 million from the federal government. So again, that was just a portion of the dollars that are needed to actually fix the project. But going forward, like I said, the mayor they've re-engineered their project and dropped their price in half.
Yeah. Okay.
So as we look for sources going forward, are we able to do the same thing that the city is doing, where they're just capping where they're at and not taking out and just, keeping what they have and adding to it?
Because our original project, because it was a dumping ground at one point on the Kemper shoreline, the original proposal was to dig it completely all out and then from foundational build it up, and that's why it was so expensive. So now they're just looking at the way the city's doing it and looking at, can we redesign just to add on top? That's why the numbers are lower now, because they're looking at a redesign.
Okay, thanks. And then the second question I had on the phase 2 of the Pike restoration, that is going to stay within pets, or does it go into the leased property at Parkside as well?
That I'm not sure. I was going to say I'd have to have Matt Collins. I would assume that it's within Pets Park, but I'm not going to say something on record that I don't know for certain.
Because I know that's an aspect of that as well, is to go to County Road A at some point as well.
My understanding is that it only goes to as far as like the beer garden where the Pike River is there. It doesn't go any further. It's all done in phases.
Right. I was just curious on how far they were going with this one. Okay, thank you.
If I could, I just want to go back to that restoration of the shoreline. Yeah, Kemper Center is based on 17 and a half acres. It's nearly 1,500 feet of shoreline. So the city has done their part as far as their shoreline restoration around each side of Kemper. So right now, you don't need to be an engineer to figure out that Kemper Center shoreline is the weakest point on that shoreline right now. If you want to protect your asset, you have to protect your asset with the shoreline. That's where it starts. So that's I think very prudent to continue to look at this, still put money towards it. I think it's important to protect our asset there, another one of our parks in Kenosha County. Thank you.
Chris, question for you. Under building improvements for Kemper Center, this past year in the budget, they were allocated $480,000, and I see in 2025, we're looking at $375,000.
So
$100,000. That's like a 22% decrease.
25 to 28 are simply placeholders.
Okay.
as Matt goes into his 10-year design and engineering project that he has, he gets updated pricing on what he needs, and then we provide a more accurate number. We just try to keep the number, obviously that's a $100,000 difference, but we try to keep it up higher, so obviously it doesn't go from 100 to all of a sudden 500 and everybody's asking what happened. So those are just simply placeholders for the time being.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I will move, seeing no more questions, we'll flip the page over to page 8. And I will say, this is probably a good time to say this. My biggest hope coming out of this meeting is so everybody obviously gets a chance to look at it, and then between now and hopefully more end of September, you guys can hit us with all kinds of questions or follow up. I obviously know a little about a lot, as in regards to the department heads know a lot about everything that's within theirs. So we're going to do our best to try and answer some of your questions here, but feel free to send questions to me or any one of the division heads and any of these line items that you're seeing to get better information. And with that, we'll move right on into the highway division equipment. The two bigger ticket items on here, the single axle trucks and the tri-axle trucks, if you're comparing this year's budget, the 2023 budget, to what you see on this paper, you would have seen tandem axles put in throughout the budget. The highway department is kind of getting away from using those. The single axles, with how the roads are being more designed now, they're bigger, they have more islands, they need more mobility. The single axles help with those, and the tri-axles help for the bigger loads and are also almost as universal as what they get from the tandem. So that's why you're seeing the tandem removed and these two on here. Some of the other items on here, we've had broken out tractors from mowers and decks. Before you would have seen tractor mowers and decks. So although that one's in blue, it's not necessarily new, but it's just giving a more accurate description to what's being shown. If anybody has any questions on any of this you're seeing, Supervisor Stock.
What's the cost savings going from a single axle or from a double axle to a single? Are they significantly cheaper, or is that?
In regards to the price of a single versus the price of the tri, is that what you're asking? I believe that these are each for 2. I should have that information. I don't think that there's significant difference between the two, but I should have that somewhere.
You could always send it later. I was just curious. But
yeah, I got it in one of my folders somewhere. I got what it is, but I believe that's for 2. I think that they range between the singles more in like the 280 and the tris more in the 300, so they're comparable. But then you have upgrades that you need to do within each one: plows, sanders, wings, things along those nature.
But as far as their hauling, like what you were saying, their hauling capacity is not that much difference between the two now.
The tri-axle would definitely be bigger. It's more a mobility thing than it is a capacity thing.
Okay. All right, good enough. Thank you.
I just have a question. With more of the bike routes like around 142 and C where there's more mowing, is that some of the reason why we need more mowers and decks? Just because we're cutting a lot more acreage now and we need more, or are these replacements, or just in addition to?
Yeah, everything that you're seeing on here would be replacing something that's old, outdated. We do have analysis, an in-house analysis, where if we were to replace everything in 2024, the cost would be $18 million. Obviously, we know we're not spending that on highway equipment in 1 year, but the state gives like predetermined rates of when things are fully depreciated. We withhold them beyond that. Some of the pieces of equipment still in the 80s and 90s that the mechanics are continually fixing, upgrading, whatever. Once they get so far gone, that's when you end up seeing them on these sheets, or before they get so far gone, you see them on these sheets. Any further questions in regards to highway equipment?
Has there been any discussion, and maybe county exec can respond to this, has there been any discussion on County Highway L, when we're going to be looking at that road? How far down?
That would, I think, that one is on a list of the next page. If I'm not mistaken.
Oh, the next page?
Because that's projects. But under the amount for the bonding, I believe that is in one of the future years. That again, I don't. Did you bring the map with you?
Yeah, we do have the map. I don't see specifically Highway L on here, but this is also more in reference to the 2023 paving projects. When we get to the highway paving, we can have Nick throw it up on the screen there.
Okay.
If there's no more questions in regards to the highway equipment, we can flip right over to the paving.
Okay.
So
Where is that?
that's it. We do have some of these maps that we can hand out to anybody on hand. I have it in my special copy. But up on the board, this is an analysis that we did. We took what the highway department has projected for their 2023 paving miles. Obviously, they're not paving 18 miles. We budget at 13 miles, and it could vary from anything that's on that map or things that aren't on that map that have popped up but require attention. Highway L that you mentioned is not specifically on this map, but that doesn't mean that it won't be on there.
It's not on the list either.
Right, and I know it's not on the third-party consultant map or projects, but we can certainly reach out to Clement with any things with Highway L.
Where does our jurisdiction end on L, on 30th Ave or 39th Ave?
30th.
Clement isn't here to answer that specific question, or Shelley. I know that there are some conversations with the chairman who wanted a particular, where I think it's 39th.
Really?
Yes. But we have done, we don't have the signalization at 39th because we are working with the city in conversations on that particular intersection to make, I know that Chairman Nudo.
Yeah. Basically what we're doing is we had the study done, which is supposed to be a stop and go light there. So we're working with the city, trying to work.
I was pretty sure it went to 30th, so I'll have to double check that.
It's 39th.
39th.
39th. Just double,
I wonder when the section from 30th to 39th transferred to the city. Because I couldn't find an IGA for that. But I'll follow up on it.
Yeah, we can certainly have Clement or Shelley will both be available tomorrow. I can certainly reach out to them on your behalf, or if you want to reach out, but I can definitely let them know.
So, Chris, I have some questions about some of the past projects we've done, looking forward to some budget practices that might be best practices. And so for example, on 142, when I came on the board, I was told that was the most expensive capital project ever done in the history of Kenosha. That was almost $50 million. So the question I have, and not necessarily to answer tonight knowing that Clement and Shelley aren't here, was an analysis done when at the same time KR coincidentally was done to see if KR could be used instead of all the work on 142. So I was wondering if once KR came on the radar, and that's also almost a $50 million project, was there an analysis done to see if we could have cut back on 142 and had more of the traffic flow on KR. So that's one question. The second question I have is, when we were planning 142, I remember it being $25–30 million. It came in at 45, almost 50 million. What would we have done, or if COVID hadn't happened and we didn't get that money? What would have happened to that project? And again, not necessarily the answer tonight, but something to consider for the future when we're doing projects like this and considering best practices. But if anyone wants to comment now, that would be fine too. So.
Supervisor Geertsen, I appreciate that question. Again, looking back, I wasn't here in my role and you weren't here in this role. But Highway 142 was done, KR was done. The last east-west major road to be done is Highway 158, to make that a 4-lane road. Now the DOT, and I know Supervisor Nedweski, State Representative Nedweski, just met with the DOT this week, and that is always, and again, I've reached out to Representatives Onstead and McGuire as well, because that is the last east-west road that needs to be done, and it is a state road. And so when they go forward and plan for the future, right now that is only scheduled to be a 2-lane redo. And I really would like the DOT to do a 4-lane, because that would be the last major through from the interstate to downtown to actually get to be a 4-lane highway. So these are those long-term questions that, when we move traffic east and west, I actually think, again, they moved forward and they went ahead with 142. It is what it is today. Highway 50 is what it is today. I actually appreciate that the DOT didn't put the jug handles that they were planning to put around Johnson Bank and on the other corner, and kept it just a regular straight intersection. And I appreciate that Governor Evers did that, because Governor Walker would have continued on with the jug handles if he had been in office. So that is one thing where I disagreed with the previous governor and his planning department. I'm looking forward to how we go forward and making sure that going forward that we partner with our state partners to make sure that the dollars that we get are most adequately spent, especially since the Highway 158, you've got the oldest industrial park right there. You've got the Kenosha City Park on the south side. So we have 2 industrial parks and the industrial park on the north side at 158 only has one entrance right now, and that is at 68th Avenue that comes out of that industrial park by Air Liquide. There, right before the culverts, and that is one of the most challenging intersection at Green Bay Road and 158. So we have to have a long-term look at that particular intersection. So these are things going forward that the team, Clement, myself, and Shelley, are working with the DOT to make sure that planning purposes that we plan for the future on those roads, because I drive 142. It's busy. I've used that as a way to get out, even though I have to go north to go south to my house. When we had all the construction earlier this year, it was on Highway 50. It was sometimes the easiest route to get out of town for me, was going 142. So I hope that going forward we can have some further conversations with just highways, and that's why putting this map together was so important, so we kind of coordinate where we're doing projects and where the state's doing projects, so that we don't do projects in the same area going forward. I will have the team send this out to all the county board members tomorrow, so that everybody can kind of get a sneak peek at where we've gone. We've already completed 9 miles of highway road construction in our area. KDOF, they're currently working on County Highway D right now. That road was pushed off last year because there was other construction going on in the area, and why do a road and then have all the trucks going up and down it and damaging it? So we held off 1 year, and now that road is being done this year. So.
Okay, thank you for that. Speaking of the paving, in what you see in the transportation infrastructure number, the 4.225 number, that does include the 13 miles at a more of a $225,000 per mile rather than the $200,000 that was put into this year's budget and was slightly below what was needed for each mile. It also includes traffic signal improvements, bridge replacements and culvert replacements, and what I talked about earlier in regards to the paving of our own internal infrastructure. The Highway C bridge rehabilitation, you're seeing that more as a new item on here. I spoke with Clement earlier today. Every 2 years, they're required to do a bridge analysis to make sure that obviously all the bridges are maintaining at a safe value. It's not that this one is unsafe, but it's becoming below a threshold of where they can get funding for it, and they have been awarded the funding. So now you're seeing that come up on here to be rehabilitated. Highway F is on here. There's a $0 amount. That road is not free. We're doing further analysis into that to get a more updated number before we put it on here. This is the section between KD and W. From where I'm told, there's a very high hill that blocks the intersection that they want to redo. Not only that, but obviously a little bit further than that to expand the footprint. So more is yet to come with that. And if there's any questions on any of the other highway paving.
I do.
Yep.
Highway K. So for the phase 2 for 2024, where are we with this? This road has been taking forever to complete, and I see that nothing is budgeted for the remainder of this year, and then $1 million for next year, and then the bulk of it in 2027. So where can anybody speak to where exactly we're at with Highway K and when it is forecasted to be completed?
This is one of those projects that is a work in project. We were trying to work with the city. There's a pot of money that the city and the county used to vie for. And
is that Pacer?
Well,
or the
it's
I know which one it is. STP, yeah.
Yes. And so last year the city got majority. We let the city have the majority share because now Pleasant Prairie is applying for that same pot of money. So there's another component that has come into place. So this is one of those pots that used to be able to help us, and now there's 3 interested parties and potentially 4. I mean, the Village of Bristol hasn't jumped in yet, or the Village of Summers, but right now it's Pleasant Prairie, us. So again, we're trying to come up with an agreement between the municipalities that are vying for the money so you can actually do a project with the amount of money that is available to us here in Kenosha County. So this year we backed off and let the city go ahead with their project, even though this project is Highway K will be in the city of Kenosha on Highway K. So hopeful to continue to work with the city and their team on how we can best utilize these dollars that are so precious. There have become some other pots of money that Clement is trying to vie for to help fund these projects going forward. But again, they come.
Well, what can we withhold from Pleasant Prairie so they're not taking our money?
Well, and it's hard because Pleasant Prairie has asked for some money as well. They have a development down in ML, I believe, and so I know Jean and I had talked their development director on a couple projects down in Pleasant Prairie as well, where it's a county road, and as they move forward with developments in their area as well. So it is really a collaboration of the municipalities that as we work on our projects together, having a plan that each other helps each other out.
This is probably the biggest complaint that we get from people is Highway K.
Yeah, it is one of those, and continue to work with the mayor on this going forward.
Okay.
Was 142 the last time we had our major STP allocation?
No, we got STP on this, I think, 2 years ago.
We did.
We had STP on K 2 years ago?
I believe so.
Okay. Did we use STP for 142?
I don't know. I can't remember that one.
Oh, if I could learn that too. So,
okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll look into that and get an answer for you.
I just had one more thing on K. We accepted, I forget how much money for that intersection. I think it's 104th or something in K to redo that. That's part of slowing down the process as well as waiting
We got
for.
3 million from Potawatomi to do that intersection. And
Right,
they've
so I
already
think
given
that's
it to
slowing
us.
things down too, not to do things until, I'm not sure, but I think that was part of one of the elements is of redoing all of K is that intersection, and something else has to get done before that can get done. I'm just trying to remember.
Well, they were looking at the water, but that's resolved, and we already got the 3 million from Potawatomi. So that's a go, and it was designed and everything. It's more doing the road itself. I think that intersection is set from the meetings that I recall.
Yeah.
If there's no other questions on the highway division projects, we can flip over. I've certainly taken notes for Clement. I'll speak to him. I'll send an email probably tonight for him to reach out to you guys with some of these questions that you guys were asking.
Vacation anymore.
Page 10 gets into the Brookside Care Center. Some of the bigger items that you're seeing on here would be the remaining funds to do the roof replacement. I believe that it has come in just under 700,000. We had previously budgeted, I think, around 480. Is that accurate? It's a roughly. Oh, Frank moved out. Okay.
Yeah, Frank left. The original budget was 480, and I believe when we had bids a few years back, it came around 640, something like that. So I don't know the newest.
Yeah. The generator project, this is an additional 200,000. This is kind of a precaution number that's sitting in here for right now. We have the generator that's going in at KCC, which has come in just a little bit over budget. We don't have any indications of the Brookside one being over budget for right now, but we obviously don't want to have that be put on hold for lack of funds.
Was the generator at 1.5 million? How much? Or 1.7?
Right. 1.7.
1.7?
If anybody else has any questions for Brookside, otherwise I'll move on to the medical examiner. Oh.
Yes, I have a question. As you know, we have a home on our land, and I was just wondering what the plan is on taking that house down. I don't see any money in the budget for that. I was just wondering if there's a plan when you're going to take it down.
We already have funds within the county that we can use within the Civic Center development funds that we allocate to each year. I think the plan is for now to have that building removed, but to actually keep up the garage because the garage is being used, they're helping use for storage of some of their equipment. Yeah, we do have the funds in there. I don't know if it's set to be demolished this year or not, but there is funds already for that. Okay. Yep. Yeah, we can certainly follow up. Seeing no other questions, we'll move on to the medical examiner. I believe in 2021, they had the same vehicle replaced. This is the one of two vehicles that they have. This is used for all of their transporting to and from. The current one is beyond its useful life, excessive miles, and they just need to have it replaced. Seeing no questions on that, we will flip to page 11. Starting with the IT budget. Previously, what you've seen here is 1.9 all the way across. Because of GASB 96, there's changes in the regulations on what can be bonded for, which I believe includes like software or things along those nature. Patty's more of a pro when it comes to that than I am, certainly. But that's why you see the reduction in price, is just simply because of what we're able to bond for going forward.
If I could, I'd like to ask the Chair of Finance Chairman Rose, do you get a detailed and itemized report of all IT purchases and what we have in stock?
No.
I'm requesting that we get what hardware equipment we have, what software equipment we have, and then what are the renewal dates and what hardware is scheduled for replacement. We spend a lot of money on IT, and I'd like to understand how that 1.9 million is being spent.
So you want that part of the budget that's presented to
Yes.
the board? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Okay, we can request that.
Thank you.
I would bring to your attention that in the budget book behind the CIP is an itemized list of that breakdown of the 1.9 or now what would be the 1.4.
But I want to understand what we currently have in stock and what's being used.
Yep.
Because, and then when the refresh date is, I think that's important because I think we've been kind of, it hasn't been as transparent probably as I'd like coming from an IT background. I'd like to understand how we're spending our money.
That could be done.
Okay. If there's no more questions in regards to IT, we'll move on to the Land Information Division. Both of these numbers that you're seeing on here both have some type of reserve or revenue. I spoke to Scott today. This is in conjunction with the whole Southeast, the sewer pack region doing this at this time. If we were to go out and do it on our own, we would be paying the full price of every one of these, which would be up in the $90,000 to $100,000 for each of these. And what this is just aerial views, both photographic and 3D dimensional topographical that they use in all aspects of the county, law enforcement, and things of those nature. If nobody has any questions on that, we'll flip over to page 12, which is the CABA High Impact Fund. This is something that we have bonded for almost every year. I think there might have been one year that we had lapsed. If I don't know, maybe not. But the $250,000 that goes in regards to the CABA.
I just have one question on this because a lot of the stuff that attracts companies to come here are the TIFs associated with them moving. I know last year it was Pleasant Prairie, the Prime Outlets that came off. Are there any others scheduled? The city has 30 plus TIFs. Are you aware of anything coming off that will make a significant difference in our operating budget? And the reason I'm asking is because that's sort of what, for me, would be the basis of our return on our investment of $250,000 every year, is when those TIFs come off, then we get a benefit from that. That's the main reason I'm asking, is seeing how that investment is paying off for the county.
The High Impact Fund for CABA is used they call it the closing, the closer. It's when there's developer that's looking in the area and they're looking at us and they're looking at someone else and CABA is negotiating with them. Sometimes the High Impact Fund can be the piece that just says, yeah, we're going to settle in Kenosha County. The TIFs are specific to the city and city developments, yes, but I don't know that the two are related to each other kind of in the capacity that you were referring.
Well, there's TIFs throughout the whole county.
There are.
Right, so
There
I guess
are.
part of us putting them over the edge with this money is to attract them generally to an area
Yes.
where there's a TIF.
Yeah.
Not always, but
exactly. Some
but
do not.
sometimes. I'm just curious how we measure that investment as far as us getting a return on that $250,000 for perpetuity, and probably going up because $250,000 is not the same a few years ago as it will be going in the future.
Right.
So I'm just curious if it's being a good investment and how we track that to determine whether it's a good use of money. Because it's really
Right.
more than 250 by the time we pay it off.
What we look at with the return on investment isn't money coming back to the county in the form of a TID closing. No, we look at it in the form of jobs and investment and overall equalized value increases. There is a slide in the bond rating presentation that was provided to the entire board. There's a slide in there on how much has been invested in the high impact fund that they have used and the return on that investment in the form of jobs and in the form of investment in the county.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, however the return is, I'm just, so there's a slide or some more information
Right.
somewhere. Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
And as far as TIDS closing, I know that there are some that are coming up in a few years, but there's nothing in the immediate future.
Yeah, okay.
And then if there's nothing further on that, that is actually the last department that makes up this packet. You can see again in the bottom where we've highlighted what the total bonding revenue and carryovers are that make up what we just discussed. And the final page, page 13, is just a revenue summary that kind of breaks out specifically for you guys for a better viewability. And unless there's any further questions, thankfully my part is done here.
Question here on the page 13. You have ceremonial courtroom restoration revenue next year, $1 million in brackets. You mean that is what is required to be raised by private sources?
Yeah, correct. That's part of the, I figure where I don't have it on here. Actually, let me flip to it.
Yeah, this is something I think we need to have some detailed report. I see where the county, okay, go ahead.
Right. Just give me
I
a
see
second,
where we
Brad.
hired a new group to do fundraising, and there was someone else doing fundraising, and I'd like to know more about what that cost is. What have we produced? Here we're $1 million. I think it was last year. You have 24 budget. There was nothing raised. Is that right? And how much was spent?
Yeah, so out of the budget that was in the 2021 is the first budget that had it revenues stipulated where we were going to bond 600 only if we raised 200. None of that money has been spent. In this year's budget, there was $100,000 that was paid for with ARPA funds that is supposed to go towards the design. None of that has been spent yet. Like you said, we still are awaiting more funds to come through this fundraising program or third party that we're using.
So we can, Supervisor Rose, we can get you a more detailed report because the commission has been working on the fundraising efforts and has money that's been there's money that's been given already. For instance, one of the larger law firms, Habish and Motier, gave $100,000, and that money has been already given to us. We have others that have been pledged to us to be the last dollar amount, a larger pledge. We have to reach certain amounts, and then we have the Jeffers Fund as well. That would be a match as well. So there's a couple different things that we can share with you. And
Yeah,
give you an
I
update.
think the board, not just me, but I think the board ought to be told how much has been raised, how much have we spent on this fundraising effort. I'd like to know that, both previously and with the new group.
I can't speak to the exact dollars and cents, but I know Joe is in the room as well, and we are meeting next week. The Blue Ribbon Committee is meeting next week, and so I can certainly report to the county board after that, kind of a status update where we are. But with the Jeffries grant and with the private funds that we have raised, we're at just under $1 million pledged or already donated to us. What's important to note is a lot of, especially the very large contributions, these organizations, private businesses, or a well-off individual, before they cut the check, they want to make sure the project is happening. And so they've signed a pledge saying, if you raise the rest of the needed funds, you have my support. And this is all going through the Kenosha Community Foundation. But we have made strides, and I will say in the short time that we've worked, and I think Joe can attest to this, the short time we've worked with the current fundraiser, we have really reignited things here to get this project done, gotten more community stakeholders involved, and really found out who are the key stakeholders and developed a plan of attack when it comes to the fundraising. Who do we want the county executive to reach out to in her capacity? Who do we want the individual members of the commission or the committee, to reach out to? And who do we want folks like yourself, Supervisor Rose, who have supported the project and indicate that you will support the project? Who do we want those folks to reach out to? And what's the proper way of attack? When, in my opinion, the first go around with this project was, let's just try to raise the money and we'll figure it out. Well, it doesn't work that way. Whereas with the current team that we have fundraising, and I know the county executive, retired Judge Wagner, Joe, and a few others, former Executive Collins, were very instrumental in picking this group. We've definitely seen improvements in the strategy, and as we meet, like I said, we're meeting next week on Tuesday, I'll be able to provide more of an update to the county board after that. But as for dollars and cents spent on the project itself outside of the fundraiser, which to my knowledge, the original fundraiser was paid through the county executive's office and the former county executive and his budget. As for the project, it was just that original, was it $100,000, Joe? The scope?
I think I'd have to defer to somebody in finance on exactly what that expenditure was. It was. It goes back to 2021, I would say.
We needed that to create the committee to then go to folks and really go to ourselves and say, is this even a feasible project? And that study said, yeah, it is a feasible project. It's an expensive project. And that's why we're working diligently to raise this through the private sector and through the citizens, because while I think it's an incredible project, I would agree with, I think, everybody in here that it's not something that's we best spend tax dollars on right now. It's an investment in our community, 100%. But when we go back to our constituents, do you want roads and police or sheriff's deputies, or do you want a courtroom? They want the roads and they want the sheriff's deputies. And so that's why we're working diligently. And again, I will provide an update to the county board after our next meeting as well.
Thank you for that.
With that, I'll take the next few items on our agenda. So the debt reduction plan. So as part of the 2023 budget, there was budget resolution language that was approved that in which the administration had committed to looking at various aspects in this current year, and this debt reduction plan was one of those items. The reason, as the debt service grows, it would eat up a larger part of our overall tax levy increase. Interest rates are still historically low, but they are creeping up, as we know, and so it is in our best interest to have a plan in place. I wanted to touch on what is the county's report card when it comes to debt. The rating agencies just provided a report in the last couple, both rating agencies provided a report in the last couple of weeks, and I'll highlight some of the information that they provided as part of those reports. Fitch ratings, they stated that our long-term liabilities are in the AAA range and our debt burden is low compared to our economic resource base. Our long-term debt and pension liabilities have been reduced from 11% to 8% over the last few years, and that we have stable long-term liabilities that have been offset by growing personal income. They do note that the debt of our overlapping municipalities account for a majority, and we don't have any control over that. In the Standard & Poor's report, they reported that our debt profile is in the adequate range. They compliment us for adhering to our debt policy, and we perform well within our debt metrics. Our debt service carrying costs are offset by the county's rapid debt amortization. And what that means is about 80% of our debt is scheduled to mature in 10 years. And they use that as an offset to our overall debt. And we also have a fully funded pension plan when it comes to our liabilities, because we're a member of Wisconsin Retirement System, one of the best retirement systems in the country. And again, they do note that our overlapping debt is somewhat high, but again, that has to do with the other municipalities and the city's overall debt. I would encourage any of the county board supervisors to take a close look at that debt, our ratings reports. There's a lot of good information on there, and our grades when it comes to counties comparable to us. I mean, we're rated AAA, which is the best that we can be. So as part of this work, finance and administration worked with our financial consultant, Ellers, this year to review a number of different scenarios. Each scenario had to do with a % reduction of our debt service over a period of time. So as we reviewed this and working with them, we determined that it's extremely important to strike a good balance in reducing their debt service and being good stewards with county funds, with the need to maintain and protect our assets and make sure that the county's not deferring maintenance to our detriment and falling behind. I know there's more than a couple county board supervisors out here that know that in the early 2000s, a previous administration overcompensated and really restricted the amount of capital and borrowing that was done. And it took there was a number of years it took us to catch up on the debt, that deferred maintenance, and the county ended up spending millions of dollars more as a result of that mismanagement. Examples of that would be the exterior of K-Cab in the courthouse. There are also a few other decisions that were made having to do with dollars and cents. Director Jansen can speak to some interior windows that are used for exterior purposes to save money, and obviously that is not a good idea. Also, the dropping the ceiling down in the ceremonial courtroom to save money on the HVAC system destroyed and cost millions to the county potentially as a result of those decisions. So the point of that brought up is that we have to strike a good balance between borrowing and being good stewards with funds, and borrowing a sufficient amount to do what we need to do. Some of the scenarios that we did review that were more aggressive, in our opinion, did go down the road of limiting and potentially costing more in the long run. So currently the administration is considering adopting a target of reducing the debt service by 5% over the next 10 years. So we would begin with this year's 5-year CIP plan and this year's 2024 budget as a start to get towards that target. The administration is committed to looking at making sure that the borrowing would match that plan going forward, and yet still taking care of the assets that we would do. Another component of that could be consider using some measured use of county reserves to reduce the amount of borrowing as well. And that's something that's allowed as part of our fund balance policy. I wanted to bring up too, similar to previous provisions in our debt policy metrics, we could build in exceptions to this target plan regarding like the human services building, or as we talked about, the Kemper shoreline restoration projects. We could exclude those as part of that overall plan because frankly, if those were included, we would not be able to reach that target otherwise. This proposal by the administration would be either in the form of a formal debt reduction plan policy, or it may be in the form of budget resolution language, and then it would be proposed and presented to the county board as part of the 2024 budget process. That'll be determined between now and then. I'll take any questions on that.
Yes, Barr. So tell us or remind us what percent of every tax dollar goes toward interest on debt?
Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you that.
All right. Perhaps you could get back to us. I think that's an important factor in determining what our debt policy should be. And the second thing is, what has been the percent of increase over, 10-year period, let's say? What percent in year 1 versus in year 10 has that increase back? Because I think that story tells us a great deal about what kind of debt reduction plan we ought to have.
Another component that I want to bring up too is that some of the borrowing that we've done in the last 5 to 10 years had to do with investing in our infrastructure, and our rating agencies have complimented on us and have noted that the economic boom that we've had in Kenosha County is directly related to the investments that we've made to the infrastructure. So on one hand, one could say that our debt has increased, but on the other hand, it was an investment toward infrastructure.
I'm not saying that it isn't. I'm just saying I think we ought to know what percent of every tax dollar is interest oriented, and how has this affected the budget for the last 10 years? What's the percentage? Have we been bumping it up 10%? Are we at is every tax dollar 40% on interest?
I will look up the information you're looking for, but I did want to point out that our debt policy requires that our debt service payments, now that's a combination of principal and interest, be less than $1.50. And currently we are at $1.09. So our debt service is $1.09 and 9 cents.
You got to put that into understandable whole, so that if you get a tax bill of X number of dollars on your house, how much is going toward interest, and how does that look today versus 10 years ago? Then I think we have a better idea. Is a debt reduction policy a good idea or not?
Okay, yeah. That's why I hesitated, because the figures that I have in my head have to do with interest and principal as well. I don't know the separated. We look at it together, but we'll make sure we'll get that information.
Not just me, but the whole board, I think, needs that.
Thank you, Barna. I think the idea of a 5% over 10 years, I think that's a good plan. Knowing what I know, about the capital financing and taking into account everything you said, I think 5% is a good goal. If I'm trying to remember, our total debt at the year end this year is going to be $160 million?
That sounds about right.
So that's the number we're looking at. Right. We're looking at that number, and we're going to look at reducing that by 5% over 10 years, with the exception of shoreline revetment, which is $4 or $5 million, and with the exception of human services building, which is $20 million. So if we carve out roughly $25 million on $160 million, we're still going to be ticking up towards that $170 million number over 10 years, right? We'll still be going over that 150. We'll reduce 160 by 8 million. So we'll be, let's say, down to 150. Then we'll be adding 25. We'll be at about 175 in the other 10 years. So that's really not bad when you look at inflation. All right. So over 10 years, you look at inflation, we're really reducing our debt and the debt service on the levy. So that does not seem like a bad target to me. So that looks like a good starting point. I agree with Chairman of Finance Committee that it would be cool to look at different milestones. So for example, I'm recalling the debt, the GO debt being about 70 million. That might be way off, but I'm just going by memory at the end of '08. And I remember now we're up at 160, so it's gone up significantly. And so that would be cool to see when you're bringing the report in. But for clarity of the supervisors here, you're talking about policy development, and you mentioned two options for presenting the policy. One was incorporating it into the budget resolution, right?
Right.
And what was the other one?
The other one would be to develop a policy, just like we have a fund reserve balance policy or a debt policy.
Yeah. What I think we should do is add this to our current policy, but adopt that as part of the budget. I think that's what would be a good practice. So. And I do like the idea of putting a goal out there for debt reduction. And if we do, whatever it ends up being after you run through the numbers, you may find you can do more than that. You may be able to throw some reserves in there to hit that number and even do a better job. There's a lot of levers you can pull, dozens of levers you can pull to hit this target, but I do think it's a commendable direction for the county to head. So.
No other questions, and I'll go on to the next item. This has to do with another topic that was included as part of that budget resolution language was to look at capital improvement plan best practices. So currently, the county's rating agencies grade our management planning favorably. Our management is rated strong and proactive with comprehensive long-range planning for operational and capital planning. And as I said before, they've concluded that our investment in the capital infrastructure has directly led to some of this economic boom that we've had in Kenosha County. So administration is considering a development, again, potentially of a capital improvement plan policy that would be presented as part of the 2024 budget, similar to the county fund balance reserve policy or the debt policy. So when administration and finance reviewed CIP best practices, it showed that informational transparency and the resolve to follow long-range planning and remain within a self-imposed reasonable range for debt incurrence was the overwhelmingly common theme for these best practices. Some municipalities have more robust documents and fancy flashy web pages and pictures and everything, but that's more cosmetic in nature. The two main things were informational transparency and picking a target and staying within that range for long term. So I want to get into a little more details of some examples of informational transparency improvements that we could do as part of the CIP project. So one of them we've already saw today was highlighting items in the current year CIP that are different than what was presented in the previous year. So if there are items that are in the CIP for this current year that weren't on this 5-year CIP, there has to be a good explanation for that. We want things to be on the 5-year CIP. You want the 5-year CIP to be a good representation of what we think are capital projects and items in the next 5 years. But with circumstances as they are, some things pop up that we weren't considering. As part of that, as part of the reporting process, we would have to explain why. And the items in blue, we'd have to explain why they weren't in previous years' CIPs. Also, there are projects that are shown potentially 3-4 years out and now all of a sudden make it to that next year's project. Again, having that information within available readily available for supervisors to see why that project was pushed forward, I believe would be a step forward in this transparency. Material legacy projects such as buildings and large-scale building improvements and large road projects above a certain threshold, potentially $5 million, that we could adjust with a construction price index, would need to have a needs assessment similar to kind of what you had mentioned, Supervisor Gertzen, having a full documentation of the purpose and ongoing maintenance expense estimates, funding requirements, all in the package, so that when it's being considered as part of a CIP for approval, all that information is there. Everything that can be thought of that is important and necessary for that approval process should be there and documented. Full funding approval in the form of a separate initial resolution would be required for any material multi-year legacy project. Now, we've done a very good job about doing that over the years, of having an initial resolution for a large multi-year project, with the exception of the Pike River project. That, admittedly, that is something that was not done, and obviously we're still working through that lapse. Periodic updates to the appropriate committees, whether it's Public Works or Finance, on legacy projects, cost versus budget. I believe that type of transparency when it comes to information, I think that would be an upgrade as well. I know that the Public Works Committee regularly goes through that, but I'm not sure if the Finance Committee would also want to know for these large-scale projects how we're doing cost, versus budget periodically. A review of the documentation necessary for each one of these projects. So obviously we're hindered from the standpoint when in the CIP and the budget book, about a half a page for each project. There is a lot of documentation that goes into each one of these capital projects and items. But to make sure that we have that in place and make sure that we have the appropriate amount of documentation for each one of these projects, I think is a step in the right direction as well. An inclusion of a future years column in the budget book, we talked about that. That's I think another important component of the transparency. There are items that may not necessarily be on the 5-year horizon, but having that in the budget book and having some exposure for the county board supervisors to see that this project may be coming up, and that it's not, and for whatever reason, if that ends up having it being needed pushed forward quickly, then it's not a total surprise that at least that it's been considered already and included as part of the CIP. Some other more minor detail things, but in the CIP pages that are within the budget book, there are some projects that logistically need to have multi-years, and also sometimes from a funding standpoint have to be broken out. I think it's important to make sure that each one of those projects detail not only that component, but also the full cost of that project or item, so that it's so whenever those pieces are being considered, then the entire cost is being considered, and that information is right there. Another piece is that so the county has done a good job of inventorying various components of capital improvements. Chris had mentioned we have a good inventory of roofs on our buildings. We have inventory of our capital highway equipment and parks equipment. Blocking, we've HVAC units, that was the other one, yeah. HVAC units was another one too. So we have all that in place. So when we describe those projects that we're putting in the CIP, then to make sure that we go that little bit extra step and say that the 2 items that are in this year's CIP were identified as the most important ones to hit. as part of that process.
If you could add, because we always ask, is this a replacement? Is this an automatic refresh? Or is this new equipment? I think would be helpful.
Okay. Thank you. That's good. And lastly, the other component, I mentioned transparency quite a bit, but the long-range planning and remaining with our debt policy and plan. That's the other component of the debt reduction plan. So with this additional steps of transparency and then working through this debt reduction plan and putting together our CIP with that in consideration of that, I think is the other step, checking that box. The last item that I had on there had to do with, yep, I see your finger up. Go ahead.
I'm raising my hand. I just want to make a comment. The idea of an initial resolution at the beginning of multi-year project is best practice. And it's something that had been done for a long time. But it's also something that becomes very confusing to the board. If we have an initial resolution from 3 years ago for a project that we're working on, and in this year's CIP, the board sees $2 million, and then they don't see an initial resolution come forward for that $2 million, especially newer board members, they many times feel like we were hiding something from them. Or how come we didn't have to approve an initial resolution for this? How come you didn't bring that to us? So as part of the transparency component, I think it's also important, and we have begun to do this when we have an initial resolution, when we have at all stages of the debt issuance process, whether it be the authorizing resolution, the set sale, or the sale, we have the list of all the projects, and there's on the bottom or on the back, because it might not fit, is what initial resolution these funds are coming from. And that should help with that transparency of understanding why you're not seeing an initial resolution for a dollar amount that's in this year's CIP.
Thank you.
I have a question. The list of the best practices that you told us, is that something that is going to actually be put in our capital improvement plan policy, or is that going to be outside it where we're just practicing it?
No, I think that's going to be part of the policy.
Okay, thank you.
Actually identified. Mm-hmm. Yes. So as I stated before, the format of these policies would either take the form of a policy or budget resolution language. Another one that I wanted to give some exposure to and some consideration for county board members, a budget resolution that we've talked about with finance and administration is also to look at potentially having budget resolution language that would allow us at year-end closeout carryover resolution to look at the dollar amount that would go to the county's general fund. Every year in recent history, I don't want to jinx it, but we've between $1 and $2 million been able to add that to the general fund, and we're in a good place with that when it comes to the rating agencies. Something that we could consider is put budget resolution language that would allow administration to recommend a certain dollar amount of that to be put aside for the purposes of building up a fund for the human services building, so that in the next 6 to 7 years, if we can put aside millions of dollars, that could reduce the amount of our final purchase price and the amount of borrowing. And so I wanted to talk about that a little bit, so to think about that, consider that as part of something that we could do. Obviously, we'd have to make sure that when we make those decisions, to make sure that we're not drawing down our fund balance and monkeying with our good percentages that we have. But at the same time, I think there's an opportunity there where we could put money aside and then reduce the amount that we have to borrow in the future for that project. with that, that completes my prepared statement. If you have any other questions?
I'm only one of 23, but everything you said resonates with me. I love it all, and I'll emphasize the idea of really locking down that. And I know as the leadership in finance, you will love this as more than I do because it's your job right now, making sure that we don't start moving dirt until funding is approved.
Right.
And you mentioned the Pike, and I know there's different circumstances that relate to the Human Services building, but we're moving dirt, and the contract does require us to buy that building. There's pretty onerous language for us if we don't buy that building, and at least there should have been some symbolic mention of the funding, the $20 million of funding, and some tacit approval, even though it wouldn't be binding. So if something like that were to happen, this unique type of a project that we have with this Human Services, at least getting on record, getting notice to the board that you're going to have to buy this thing in 5 to 7 years, and you're going to have to come up with $20 million. So, to fold this into our budget resolution, that Chairman of Finance Committee will have to recognize we have to set a little bit more time aside to get a walkthrough of all of this. But I'm sure he'll accommodate that. But this will move us ahead with a better policy. So thank you for all your work on that.
So as you're talking through everything and everything we've done, and I don't know how many years in a row now we've had this AAA bond rating. But my first question is what would be the next rating lower than that? And if we were at that level, what do you think we would be paying in interest?
So the next level down is the easy question. That would be a AA plus.
Okay, and half a percent difference, 3%.
I think Greg has mentioned in the past that it's a half to 6.
So a half a percent based on what we're paying right now would be over a 10% increase, right? We're paying 3.3 something right around there. So if we had to pay 3.8, that'd be an 11 or 12% increase in interest.
That would be hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Right. So as we look over the span of millions of dollars, $150 million, I don't know if all of that is under AAA right now, but some percentage of it is. And going forward, hopefully as we pay off, whether it's AA plus or less than that, we should be able to maintain that better interest rate, which would save who knows how much money long term, right? So in saying that, is there a way to identify if we're going to do these CIP projects, is there a way to prioritize those which best reflect us maintaining that AAA bond rating? You referenced a couple of them when you're talking about the infrastructure, and that was something that was referenced. And then you also referenced earlier that we ignored some things, which then we had to play catch up. And that probably hurt our rating because they didn't say our infrastructure is strong, or I don't know how that whole bond rating system goes. But I think there should be something that maybe there's 5 things, how we prioritize what we bond and when we bond it based upon that reduction plan. But I think there should be some formula that helps us maintain that AAA bond rating, and that's our first priority when we look at budgeting for what we're going to borrow, whether it's a note or a 20-year bond. I think if we don't do that, then we potentially, you guys are great at this, but I'm not sure you're going to be here 20, 30 years from now, right? So it seems like there should be something in place that we always say, in order to maintain that AAA bond rating, these are the top 5 things we have to check these boxes on, or however many boxes there are that we've discovered over, or practices, whatever it might be, that has allowed us to get to that point and maintain that point. And I think you talked about a lot of them when you were just talking. I just don't know if they're prioritized in some way, which one's the most important, and then we just go right down. That leads us to this AAA for.
Yeah, unfortunately, the rating agencies, they don't make it necessarily crystal clear on what pushes you over to AAA. And so when we consider our capital projects, we have to obviously consider our needs, and then overall kind of overarching goals when it comes to economic development, that sort of thing. When it comes to, I guess when it comes to our report card and when it comes to our rating, it's important that we have a debt policy, which we did. That was something that Dave had to check the box for in order to get us there. To have a debt policy, we had to have debt metrics in there to make sure that we're not incurring enough debt, more debt for the county taxpayers, and and we had metrics that we have to stay under, and we've done that. That's checking another box. So that's the kind of process that we go through. We know what they look at when they report, in the report they mention that kind of stuff.
The rating agencies, each rating agency has their own criteria, so it's not a one-size-fits-all. But one of the base things that they do look at is our economic development and the increase in the personal income. So one of the things that Barna quoted when he was reading his piece was a quote from, I think it was Fitch, and it talked about our debt in relation to personal income. Maybe that was an S&P. So there are many things that go into increasing the personal income in Kenosha County. Businesses that come in that have higher paying jobs increase the personal income. Our population increasing, the working population increasing, those things have an impact on increasing our personal income. So there are pieces of that might not be the building for the economic development, but the things that bring people to the area that may not have that direct correlation of adding a job, but have the direct correlation of making it the place where people want to live. Correct. And so it's difficult to say what exactly those things are. Some of those might be we have great golf courses. Some of those might be we have awesome parks. Those aren't the economic development, but to get the businesses to come to bring in the jobs, then we have the roads and we have the areas that make it very equitable, including the high impact fund, to draw them to be that deal closer, to say, oh, Kenosha County is it. There's a whole lot of other work that goes into it. That's the end. We're trying to decide between here and there. So all of those pieces play a part. It's difficult to say what exactly the priorities are.
Well, I hope we're not finding it by accident then.
I think we're finding it holistically.
You know what I'm saying? It seems, I know there's a lot of things, but it seems like there should be, I don't know, it seems like we should be prioritizing. Sometimes we do have limited resources on where we're going to put it that will best allow us to achieve that AAA rating, because it will, long term will save us millions of dollars on interest payments. So
yes,
but
we're doing something.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I guess this was very informative. I want to thank you to the finance department for taking the time and the great presentation. And if anyone has got any questions or anything, let's try to do it before the budget is completed by asking the finance department or department heads and everything. And before I forget, I want to say thank you to the person that really is responsible for getting us tonight this place and getting everything done, which that will be Jill. I know that Sam and I tried to take the credit, but the credit goes all to Jill. Thank you, Jill. Okay. Anything else, Sam, you want to close remark?
No, just thank everybody for coming tonight and taking time out of your busy schedule on this upcoming holiday weekend.
Motion to adjourn.
Dicker, second by Supervisor Zach. All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.